What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Ear Hustling Podcast. We are season 3, episode 17. Why they let me open the show and have the first word, I have absolutely no idea. But we're going to spin it around the table like a top. Prince, my man, what's up, buddy?
Hey, what's going on?
How you living?
I've been pretty good. I'm glad to be kind of back. I don't want to say the passenger seat, but kind of back co-driving now this week. So yeah, co-driving, I'll say.
Is that another millennial term for, you want to share the workload? Is that what that is?
Yeah.
All right. Very nice. E-S, Eric.
Hey,
what's up, buddy?
On,
I didn't finish that one. I didn't finish it.
Thank you for exercising maturity today. I appreciate it.
I'm trying. I'm withholding. How you feeling, buddy?
I'm feeling pretty good. I can't complain. I'm looking forward to the show today, looking to get educated on another topic that I have very loose knowledge on. So I'm excited.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that because you look like shit. No, I'm just kidding. You look great, buddy. You look great. You look great.
Not as pretty as you, though. I can notice the beard's filling in real nice.
Dude, I need a haircut, something fierce. I really do. Speaking of things that are beautiful and pretty, the face of the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Shut up, James. Not talking about you. Soleil, how you feeling, girl?
I'm doing really good. I was going to insult you, but since you gave me a compliment,
I did.
I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
I appreciate that.
I can't promise it the rest of the show, but for this block, I will not do it. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that because I'm sure that I'll deserve it later. I'm sure I will.
Absolutely.
All right, J-Mo, how you doing, buddy?
Great, man. Doing great. Happy to be here. Was happier on the cruise, but I'll take an hour with you all.
Back to the real world, huh?
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, did everybody know that James was on vacation?
No, really?
Wow, where did you go?
It's amazing. Nobody knew that.
No. I try to live in secrecy. I'll tell you all about it later.
Yeah.
On that note, I think that might have been the shortest shooting the defecation we've ever had. So, good job, Patrick.
I was given specific instructions. Everybody,
you are. So, listen, this show I'm very excited about. This, as Patrick mentioned, unconscious bias. Eric, you said this is a subject that you know very little about, and trust me, you're going to know more about it than you think. This is a very interesting, serious topic. I love this cast. You all know this. We can laugh, joke, and have a good time. But when it's time to get serious, we will. And we're probably going to still throw in a few jokes from here and there. But this is a very serious topic, and definitely something I'm looking forward to getting something out of and educating some listeners who may not be fully aware of what unconscious bias is. So we are not alone. Isn't that a song? Please don't sing, Patrick. We have some guests, and I would like to bring them to the stage now. First off, we have Dr. Jonathan Marion, who has come to us, and in his intro, he has something I absolutely love. It says, and I'm going to read it verbatim. He believes when we live, connect, and communicate authentically, we send out ripples, which sends out ripples, which makes the world a more caring and connected place, one ripple at a time. I absolutely love that, Dr. Marion. I cannot wait. You told us that we can call you Jonathan. I've already screwed up. My apologies. Jonathan, we're looking forward to hearing more from you and about you, but welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here.
Awesome. We also have Tiffany Obing. And Tiffany is a lawyer and DEO professional of nearly 15 years. Tiffany became inspired to join the diversity and inclusion movement after taking her first employment law class in 2008. Tiffany was fascinated by articles and daunting statistics highlighting the lack of diversity in law, particularly in Black women. Tiffany works as an employment discrimination attorney, and her career tracks include 6 years as a senior equal employment opportunity advisor for a prominent higher education institution. Tiffany has now found a unique, nuanced way to tackle diversity in the workplace by children books. And the books that you see behind her, she's authored all of them. Look forward to hearing more about that. Tiffany hopes to inspire a new generation of diverse lawyers. Her book has been a staple for career days and Jack and Jill's organization's Law Day event. So please, a round of applause for Tiffany Obing. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank y'all. This is awesome. I'm excited.
Awesome. All right. So we're gonna jump right in. We'd like to, as I mentioned earlier, guys. I gave a very brief introduction. So what I'd like to do now is just each of you take a few moments just to introduce yourself a little bit more. Just talk a little bit about yourself, so we can learn a little about you. Tiffany, let's start with you.
Well, I felt like that was very comprehensive, but yeah. So I am in the equal opportunity space. I was practicing employment discrimination law for a few years. Like you said, what I found fascinating about it was the fact that we can help. I felt like I was part of the civil rights movement. Like doing this work, I feel like I'm doing my part in trying to make a difference, socially. And so to be able to, in 2020, figure out another way to effect social change, which was through children's books, was interesting. It was very inspirational for me. It was interesting, but honestly, at the time when I started writing children's books that featured Black characters, the Andrew series features my son. So I wasn't thinking about, oh, he's a Black boy, you're making a difference. I was just like, this is my son. But as I kept publishing and putting these Black faces on these covers and just, showing Black kids in everyday situations, normalizing us being in spaces that we haven't been, such as in the courtrooms or in the science fields, people were like, oh my gosh, you're a social impact author. And I'm like, me? And so that has been my journey as an attorney in the EO space and then as an author in a similar space.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Jonathan?
Yeah, so I actually, with this type of topic, before I really had a definition for it, back when I was in undergraduate, I ended up being the first director of intercultural understanding at my university and was really part of trying to bring together the different student groups that were representing different populations who didn't feel like the mainstream represented them. And through that, I got interested in different people understand the world. And so ended up getting and I ended up teaching classes related to culture and medicine and how, what on the surface of it looks like it's one thing, like the body and medical systems really depends on our viewpoint, and that interacting with patients from lots of different backgrounds really is a very different thing because of how we all interpret the world. And after a 20-year career as a cultural anthropology professor, I now work as a transformational life coach and consultant and speaker and do a lot of consulting in the DEI plus space.
Awesome. Jonathan, thank you for being here and thank you for sharing. So we're going to jump right in. First question I have, and I'm going to kick this over to Tiffany. What is unconscious bias?
So in a nutshell, unconscious bias can be described as the assumptions or presumptions or stereotypes or generalizations you make about someone based on what you see and based on your experiences with someone or people who you think are similar to them. So for example, and I hope I'm not moving too far ahead, but for example, teachers, I would take teaching as a field. So when you think about teachers, you think about women, you think about maybe white women, maybe Black women. You don't think about Black men. So if you were to come across a teacher or a couple, so for instance, me and my husband, he used to be an educator and I'm a lawyer, as you guys know. And so when people say, what do you do? They would expect him to be the lawyer and me to be the educator, right? So they're always like, oh my gosh, really? So that's an unconscious bias. And unconscious bias is not necessarily a bad thing. It's bad when you don't dig deeper. It's bad when you act in a way that harms someone else because of the unconscious biases that you have. And if you take the time to recognize that we all have unconscious biases, then it can all be a better place. We all have it. So the first thing is to recognize that we all have unconscious biases based on our background, based on our experiences, based on our lives. And so all you have to do is recognize them so you can be more cognizant of them and so you can work on changing them if needed.
Yeah, Tiffany, thank you for that. That's a great summarization. Like you said, we all have them, and I think that's the first step, just to understand that. And it's the way we all make sense of the world that we live in, right? So that's very important. So thank you for sharing that. Jonathan, if you don't mind, give us some examples of. I know there's different types of unconscious bias. Give us some examples of some of those different types.
Sure. I'd like to follow up. I think the framework that Tiffany suggested is really a very great explanation. And I think the important point there is it's not necessarily ill-intended. And a lot of the times people get scared of talking about this because they hear the word bias. And no one wants to think of themselves as a biased human being. So I think as an entry point, one of the ways we can really shift is understand that it's dangerous. It becomes potentially damaging when we're unconscious of it and we don't realize that it's our interpretation and not fact. So if I look at someone and I see one thing about them, their gender, their mannerisms, their presenting racial background or something like that, and I say, okay, now I know about that person because I recognize one thing. Those are the stereotypes that can be very damaging, and oftentimes it's not that it's intended. It's we grew up and that's what we got exposed to. Realize we've internalized it. So if I see someone and I say, okay, these are the types of foods they eat. That's pretty undamaging most of the time. But again, say you're in a medical setting, and so you assume what food they eat, but maybe they actually have medical conditions or a diet which counterindicate that. Another example would be, the university I used to work at, they put in new doors and they didn't think about the fact that not everyone is able-bodied. And so they put the lock down at ground level. Well, take someone who is in a wheelchair. How are they supposed to unlock that? Another example would be, just even online communication. Again, the university I used to work at, when they started using Zoom during the pandemic, they automatically populated students' gender based on registration material, which is legal. Not everyone identifies that way, and they didn't have an ability for people to adjust it. And so then we make assumptions about this is who that person is, how I interpret those variables.
Yeah, definitely. And Jonathan, thank you for sharing that. There are some issues with Wi-Fi. You mentioned it may be. If you don't mind, if you can take this opportunity to do what you suggested, log out, come back in, we'll bring you right back on. See if that can clear up. One of our listeners, Goldie, has already stated that she's a teacher and she is a white woman. And she mentioned CCSD has great diversity training for teachers. Goldie, thank you for chiming in. I'm just curious if you don't mind chatting again. Have you gone through any sort of unconscious bias training? Just curious if that's something that's offered in diversity training that you have in your school district. While we wait on that, Soleil, you have some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. CCSD is Clark County School District here in Nevada, and so Goldie works out here in Nevada. So my question, where do unconscious biases come from? How do we reduce them? Or should we reduce them? Is it necessary to try to reduce them?
Yeah,
And
so, oh, I'm sorry. So unconscious biases mainly come again from like our life experiences. And as it was explained to me early on when I was learning about it, was that it's more of a fight or flight response. It's intended to keep you safe. So for example, if you're walking down the street and someone comes towards you with a gun, you're not going to sit up there and say, let me learn more about you. Like you're going to run, right? So it's there to protect you. It's just when people, again, don't realize that everybody has an unconscious bias, and sometimes it can be damaging or harmful. And so an example of it being damaging or harmful, taking a similar scenario, is I'm walking down the street and then I see a Black guy in a hoodie. And so automatically I flee because I think he's a danger. That's when your unconscious bias is damaging. how do you work on overcoming or changing your unconscious biases? Again, the first thing is you have to recognize that we all have them. And they do have tests out there, and Dr. Marian or Jonathan can probably remind us of what those tests are. I haven't done them in a while. But they do have tests out there where you can uncover or learn about your unconscious biases. So first, you have to learn about them, figure out, recognize that you have them and learn about them. And then you take the time to realize that you just need to get to know people. So one of the ways, as James let you guys know, that I tackle diversity, for example, is through children's books. So in doing so, I'm putting out these positive images of Black children, Black family, Black people doing positive things, doing everyday things. One book that I have that I think is important for this conversation is Black Boy Hair Joy. And it is what it is called. It is about celebrating Black boys and their hairstyles. And why I really like that book, especially since I'm in Houston, Texas. So in Texas, a school district in Texas, this boy has been kicked out of school, suspended because of his locks, right? And so one of the images in my book is a boy with locks. And so if a kid, not just a Black kid, but any kid starts seeing these images of Black boys with these different hairstyles, when they see them in real life, it won't be shocking to them. It won't be scary to them. It'll be normal. They won't be like, oh my gosh, your hair, oh, he must be this, he must be dirty because he has locks. So putting out these images, coming across images, learning about people, and having a more diverse workforce, diverse friendship can help uncover or overcome unconscious biases.
Can we, so Dr. Jonathan, you were offline for a moment. I just want to get your response to this question. But where do unconscious biases come from, and how do we reduce them? If you could quickly chime in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for repeating for me. And sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm actually in Indonesia right now, and the Wi-Fi is a little unstable. So where do they come from? They're the things we internalize along the way. So when you're growing up, even before you start to be verbal, you see how your parents react. What are the things that they shy away from? Tiffany gave the example of seeing, a Black man in a hoodie. Well, if you're with your parents and you notice that they're moving, or you even feel their body shift away slightly, you start to internalize that before you even have conscious thinking about it. And so it's these things that we learn through association, through experience. That's what's really unconscious. The things that we're told later usually are more conscious. And so that's part of why they're so insidious. That's part of why they're so hard to overcome, because we didn't even realize we had learned them as an interpretation of the world around us. As far as addressing it, I think one of the really important frameworks that helped me comes from a medical anthropologist, Gerian Galanti, who differentiated between generalizations and stereotypes. And her point was that a generalization is saying, I see something that I recognize about you, and therefore I know things that might be true, but it's up to me to find out. And this is where I think Tiffany's point of just getting to know people as individuals is so important. And in contrast, a stereotype is saying, I recognize something about you, and therefore I think I know everything about you.
Thank you very much for that. Tiffany, next question. I'm very big on DEI in the workplace. I lead a business impact group, or ERG, as some companies may call it, for the LGBTQ plus IA community at my company. And so my question for you, can unconscious bias impact inclusion within the workplace? And if so, how can we avoid that?
It definitely can, and it definitely will, because as Dr. I keep calling you Doctor, but as Jonathan has said, when you make the assumption and then think that it's the totality of a person. So if your assumption is negative, so again, you see a Black guy with locks and you're like, oh my gosh, he's dirty, he's a thug, he's a Rasta. And that means you're not getting to know them. That means you're probably excluding them. And so that's going to impact their inclusion. we're already having issues with being underrepresented in the workplace in a lot of different workplaces anyway, or fields anyway. So when you're 1 or 10 out of 2,000 that look like you, I mean, of course you can huddle with your 1 or 2, but it becomes really upon your team members and your coworkers and the leadership, top-down leadership, to really work on having an inclusive workspace. I have like, I don't know, I'm battling within, because I know ERGs are a space for people who have similar experiences, thoughts, and just similarities to bond and help each other throughout the workplace. But I also am like, is that giving the workplace in general an out? Like, oh, they have their people. And so creating these sanctions. So I always wonder, I mean, I've been in ERGs, I'm not saying go away or anything, but I always wonder, ERGs, they have their presidents and they have their members, and you have to advocate for yourself and your activities and your events. And so, in my opinion, the company is not really like, they're not giving you the money for it. I hope I'm making sense. So I just really like kind of battle myself when I talk about ERGs. They're necessary, but I'm like, it's a scapegoat kind of. Anyway, so how can you overcome is by being open, getting to know more people. Is a leadership thing. We have to hire the people, and to hire the people, we have to make sure that we're building a pipeline of diverse talents. And so again, it kind of starts with the children. We have diverse pipelines, but it starts at like college a lot of times, or high school. So we have a high dropout rate already, so the diversity is going to suffer. And so I advocate for having a diverse pipeline that starts much earlier, like elementary. And so as you have more and more diversity, then inclusion, because you have more diverse thinking, you have more diverse people, you have more diverse a lot of things. And so that just kind of lends itself to having a more inclusive workplace where people feel like they can come as themselves because they're not the only one.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I really resonate with your point. My job does a great job with DEI training, but I do feel like my leading the ERG, it's a separate job, right? And I'm not getting paid for that. So from my core job, and we have about 8 of them. There's the LGBT one, and it's also allies. So you don't have to be just a member of those groups. You could be supportive of those groups and join in. So everybody's included. There's a Hispanic one. There's a Hawaiian, Asian Pacific one. But to your point, the work that I put in maybe 4 or 5 hours a day on top of my regular job. So in a way, I can see where you say the company is sort of pushing that off on me or on the other leaders across the company. So that resonated with me. My last question for you, Tiffany, since you are an attorney, is unconscious bias in the workplace illegal? And like how overt would it have to be to prove it, to say, hey, this is unconscious bias and it's illegal? How do you prove that?
So of course I'm gonna give you the attorney answer. It depends. And so then I'm gonna reel it back and say that in my current job, I'm able to give advice and guidance on complying with Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which is the statute that prohibits discrimination in the workplace, right? So in doing so, getting to your question, there have been, and we're like, we get one more hair complaint. There have been so many complaints where a manager is like, I want to tell this woman that she can't wear her hair in a certain style, or she can't wear her hair with a certain color, and it's usually a Black woman. And so we now do have, of course, we've always prohibited discrimination, not always, but since 1964, we prohibited discrimination based on race, but it really didn't include hairstyles or hair colors. But now with the Crown Act, and don't make me explain to you what each letter means, but with the Crown Act that protects against hair discrimination in the workplace, it does cover like your styles and your textures and things like that. So now Black people can, or all people can wear their hair the way it comes out their head. So that's perfect. So is it illegal? So if that person, if the manager takes action, adverse action, employment action against the person because they choose to wear their hair in braids, they are a good employee, they have nothing else that is wrong other than they have their hair in braids, then yes, that could be illegal.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you both for being here. I'm going to toss it over to Eric. You're on mute, buddy.
Oh, I am so sorry. I apologize about that. Tiffany, you mentioned, a lot about the kids and their perspective. Do you find if there's a certain age or a certain grade level where a child starts to show an unconscious bias?
Ooh, showing unconscious bias. That's a good question. I don't know if I know the answer because I don't think I've ever thought of it like that. What I've thought about is the perception. Like kids are way more perceptive than we give them. I have thought about that. And for example, speaking as an attorney and author and mom, I was at an event selling my books, and this person said they were going to buy my book because this little girl who she teaches got in trouble by the librarian because she was coloring inside the books. Why are you coloring inside the books? Because none of the pictures look like me. And I was like, how old is she? And she was like, she's in first grade. I'm like, first grade? So I've thought about it in that way, that kids are way more perceptive earlier than I thought, at least. So they are aware of their differences. They're aware of how people perceive them. They're aware of where they belong or where people think they belong. So they're more aware than I thought. But I'm going to try to, if y'all let me, punt it over to Jonathan and see if he has an answer.
Yeah, so I don't know an age, but I think the point you're making is really important, that it starts much younger than we realize. And I'm hoping it's shifted now, but I know that, years ago when they had, introduced children from different backgrounds, at least in the US, to dolls, all of the preferences at the time were for white dolls, regardless of what background someone was from, because they had internalized from everything they saw in media and society around them that was the standard of what counted as cute or pretty or something like that. And to the best of my knowledge, that's starting to shift. But the very fact that even existed is the evidence that it starts so young, and it's long before we start actually explicitly teaching or telling people things. And I think that's also a really important point there, that part of what makes it unconscious bias is we see what people do. We see what our family does. We see what our peers do starting very young. And we take that to be what's normal, but normal not just in a statistical sense, but as right. We put a moral attachment to it, and that's where it can become really damaging.
Okay, thank you for that. And you know what? Another question just popped up inside of my head. Don't know if you can answer it or not. But what about children that are autistic? They tend to have a different way of looking at things, not like, non-autistic people. You guys have any experience with children with autism as far as an unconscious bias?
I don't, and I wouldn't feel comfortable speaking about that because I don't have that knowledge firsthand or studying it. So no, unfortunately, I can't answer that.
Okay. And Jonathan?
Yeah, I can't say I have experience or expertise as far as children and neurodiversity in that sense.
Okay. Well, thank you. Those are all of the questions that I have. Which one of my colleagues are going next?
That is me, sir. So, Jonathan, I'm going to come to you here. If you don't mind, this is a time for us to be vulnerable, if you don't mind. And if you do, just say pass. It's okay. I'm an open book. I'm going to go first. What I want to ask both of you and Tiffany, I'll start with you, Jonathan, is what is an unconscious bias that you've discovered about yourself, and how do you check yourself in that? I'm also going to go to my fellow panelists as well. Like I said, I'll start and then I'll come to you, Jonathan. For me, affinity bias is something that I know that I have, that I subscribe to, if you will. Patrick, I'm calling you out, you too. I'm from Detroit. When I see someone else is from Detroit, I live in Georgia now. You must be a great person. You're from Detroit. But let's first start talking here. Are you from the east side or west side? East side, you're good. West side, not so much. You're a Detroit Lions fan. Sorry, Soleil. You knew this about me. She's from the west side. Anyway, Detroit Lions. You're a Detroit Lions fan. Once again, you have a place in my heart, right? So those are definitely some things I have as well, just once again, to be vulnerable. I've worked in staffing for many years. When I see a resume, and if it's a name that I have a tough time pronouncing, the first thought in my mind is, I'm not calling this person. I don't get past the name. So I have to check myself. And the way I check myself is by saying, so what? What does it matter? What does it matter that I can't say the name? Try, be vulnerable once again, and ask the person for the proper pronunciation. It's okay. So I don't allow that to get in my way, as well as the affinity bias. Just because you're from Detroit doesn't mean you're a good person. Just because you're a Lions fan doesn't mean you're a good person. I know that. So I have to check myself with that. So it's Jonathan.
Yeah, one of the ones I had to really come to grips with is one of the privileges I had was growing up in a background where higher education was just very normal. And so people spoke in a certain way based on just what's accepted in academic settings and how people with that type of background speak. And so when I started to travel more, not out of the country, that I accepted, English isn't a first language, but different regions of the US, when I went away to college, when I moved to the South, oftentimes when I first hear someone speaking in a way which doesn't match that register, there is this thing in me which is like, oh, they're not that intelligent. And that's not true. It's blatantly not true. We just learn to speak the way people around us do. And it's the difference between descriptive linguistics of just how does the language get used versus prescriptive. This is the way it's supposed to be. And so, I've learned to really check myself and listen to the person and the ideas and really try and put a filter on how I'm reacting. And one thing I want to say about this is because some of these things we learn so young and so early, sometimes we're always going to have some type of initial internal reaction. And I don't think, it's a problem if we make someone wrong for having whatever is at a gut level. The problem becomes when they're not willing to then interrogate that, when they're not willing to say, I'm not going to act on that without trying to understand better.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Tiffany?
So when I was in college, because I was a criminal justice major, because I thought that all lawyers were criminal attorneys, because I did not know any better. I did not meet a real attorney until I was like in 11th grade. And that attorney was a Black male who was a criminal lawyer. So anyway, criminal defense lawyer. So anywho, I was in criminal justice class and I took a class called Signature Killers. And signature killers, like Jeffrey Dahmer, for example, he wasn't that old, but his signature killers tended to be white men of a certain age and of certain characteristics, right? So whenever I would go to a store and I would be because I'll be by myself because I'm in college, I would go to a store and I'd be on an aisle with someone that seemed to fit those characteristics. I would flee that aisle. I'd be so scared. So I have checked myself. And I mean, I'm still aware of my surroundings, but I don't just automatically say, oh, he's a white man that's of a certain age, so he must be a signature killer. He's trying to get me and take me. So I don't know. That was kind of funny.
No, definitely get it. Once again, it's the way we make sense of the world, right? So they're not bad. Doesn't make us bad people. So, yep, I get it. Patrick.
Speaking of bad people being Lions fans, I mean, we all know that that's the case. So, I mean, we start talking about sports teams bias. You're going to throw stones, baby. You got to throw them back at you. I mean, there isn't really many Lions fans, period, let alone good ones. I relate to a lot of what you guys said. Also, I forget what you called it, James, being from your hometown, not proximity bias, affinity bias. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I I'm an entertainer on where I live. So, I wear these Buffalo Bills shirts everywhere I go. So I'm always looking for people from my hometown to high five and celebrate. So I definitely feel that. One of the big things for me, and I touched on this in one of the other shows, was the post 9/11 stuff on airplanes and things like that. It's not necessarily something that I'm proud of necessarily, but it's something that was real. I mean, there were several times that I was on an airplane post 9/11 and it hit me like a ton of bricks, like, oh crap, I don't feel safe, and it almost puts you into a mode of your inner conscience needs to take over and say, knock it off, one of those kinds of things. So again, I don't really have much else to add other than, like I said, the post 9/11 thing. Everybody knows the Bills are the best team in the NFL. So, that's fact, not bias. That's it.
Patrick, thank you for sharing that. Godey shared, I had a student today say something about real Mexicans being a certain skin color. I think he was 7 or 8. I told him there's all different skin colors in Mexico. Mexican's a country, not skin color. So, Tiffany, I'm going to come to you for a question, and I'm going to come over to Jonathan. So, Tiffany, you mentioned in one of your interviews that I saw that your husband and your mother supported you to publish your first book. You self-published all 25 of your books. So once again, congratulations. As Soleil also is a self-published author. But I just wanted to find out from you, Tiffany, what was your why? You mentioned that you always wanted to be an author. So what was your why to push you to become an author?
So again, I started in 2020, or that's when I first published. But of course, we've had our manuscripts written for years before. I didn't know there was an opportunity to do any publishing. I didn't know that existed. And so in 2020, we're on lockdown. Instead of going into the office, now we're at home, working from home all day long. And so came across a Facebook group that was talking about self-publishing. And I was like, wait, what? That's a thing? And I can do it? So I put on my legal hat, started doing a lot of researching. And my mom and my husband had been in my ear about publishing a book. And I'm like, it's not that simple, you guys. But I went ahead and published Andrew Learns About Actors in August 2020. And that was really just to accomplish a bucket list item. It was to shut my husband and my mom up. And it was to build a legacy with my son, Andrew. He was like 4 at the time. So it was, all those things. I was like, we love to read. I did actors because we both love TV. And so I was like, this would be something we can enjoy together. So then the pandemic is ongoing. We're still at home. I'm seeing my mom and my husband, because again, at the time they were educators, having to teach from their houses. Okay. And I'm like, wait, what is happening here? And so I also, at the time, Andrew was in preschool and his preschool teacher was a Black male. So I started thinking about when I was growing up, like, were there any males or Black males in elementary? And I found that interesting. So I created Andrew Learns About Teachers in 2021, or put that out in 2021, because I wanted to pay homage to the teachers during that time period. The ones that have taught me. I'm an attorney, so I've had so many teachers. And to also put out the image that Black men can be teachers at the lower level. Right. Okay. So now getting to the why. So I did that. And then after publishing that, I'm now like, I guess, in the author community or whatever. So I'm seeing statistics that show that children's books lack diversity. Like we're at 13%. The books that feature Black characters are at 13%, right? And I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense. So I realized that I could do something, and so I did do something. And so I went and published like 8 books 6 months later, or within 6 months. And then I just kept going because my son would inspire me with more. I would find areas that I thought needed to have representation, such as the seasons. I'm like, where are the seasons books other than The Snowy Day that this features a Black character, talking about the seasons? I build my books or create my books on inspiring, educating, and normalizing our children. And so with the seasons books, they are educating the people about the different seasons, right? And then I saw that in the honesty space, there wasn't any Black representation, or at least not much. So I said, I'm gonna put out a book where a kid, is a Black boy is running around with a cape and he knocked down a lamp, and now he's trying to figure out if he's gonna tell the truth or not. Like, that's just normal stuff. And I have people say, oh, I could definitely picture my son running around the house with a cape on, knocking over stuff. I'm like, exactly. So that became my why, just to hopefully make the world a safer place for our kids, especially our Black boys. So that's what I'm doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey, Tiffany, if you want to make a transgender best friend for the character in the book named Soleil, please do so. I won't be offended by that.
I got you.
That was not a shameless plug at all. So one thing that Jonathan shared with us, I'm going to share at the bottom of the screen here. There's a self-test that you can take. Harvard, I've done several Harvard self-tests. They're awesome. We're definitely going to put this on our social media as well. So Jonathan, thanks for sharing that. And he gave an alternative one as well that I will also put up at the end of this show. So there it is, scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Now what I would like to do is I would like to come over to Jonathan, and we kind of touched on this, both you and Tiffany did a little earlier, but if we go a little deeper in how to self-check yourself, what are some tips that you would give? I'm going to say new leaders, but also we need some old leaders to hear this as well. What are some tips that you would give to someone to check themselves when they identify that they have some unconscious bias?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And again, it's the challenge because it is unconscious, so we don't realize we have it. So it's sort of the question, how do you realize what you don't know? Because you don't know it. And I think this is where the idea that, bias can be a daunting word, because again, as I said before, none of us want to think about ourselves as being biased human beings. And however we see and understand the world, we think we're right. And that makes sense, right? That's logical. If I thought something else made more sense, I'd do something else. None of us wakes up in the morning and go, I can think of something better, I'm not going to do it. And so I think the starting point is just realizing what else is possible. What is a different framework? So just even, if I was looking at this from a different perspective. So if you're a leader of whatever type of group or organization, if I wasn't someone in leadership, if I was someone who was a participant, of a member, if I was someone who was looking to join, what does this organization look like? What does being a participant look like? And okay, if I can imagine that, what if I came from background A? What if I came from background B? Would I feel equally like I belong? And I think this was a really important point that both Soleil and Tiffany brought up earlier about that issue of belonging. And I'd just like to conclude with a really important idea from Brené Brown, who points out that fitting in is the opposite of belonging. Fitting in is saying, I need to change who I am and present differently to feel like I fit in with you. Belonging is, I'm welcome as I am. And so if we really want to start unpacking our unconscious biases, it's, does everyone feel equally, no matter what their background, like they can show up as themselves? If so, then I'm doing a good job. If there are things that are getting in the way of that, what are my perspectives which maybe don't account and don't allow for that? How can I act differently? How can I make sure that people feel like they belong however they are?
Awesome. Tiffany, same question.
Yeah, so as a leader, I do make sure that I'm checking my unconscious biases. I guess I do have I don't have it because I'm conscious of it, right? So as people age in the workforce, there are certain generalizations or stereotypes that are made about them, right? And so as a leader, just recognizing that everyone who is over a certain age doesn't mean they're less capable. So for instance, they may not be as fast, but for the job that I do, how fast do I need them to be? Like, are they still meeting deadlines and turnarounds that's imposed? And then proficiency, how proficient do I need them at a program? And if they're not as proficient, everybody has a starting point. So what can I do to support them? So for a leader, finding ways to, I guess, like Jonathan said, creating equity and making space for people to have a voice. So what was important for me in my job before I became a leader was that my leader always made me feel, and she's not Black, she always made me feel like my voice was important. And that wasn't to say that she was going to always agree with what I said, but she would say, I want to hear your opinion, or I will force my opinion. And she'll be like, I heard that. I heard that. And she'll either go with it or she'll say, I'm still not going with it. But the fact that she allowed me to have a seat at the table, if you will. And speaking of seats at the table, she would take me along to leadership meetings and would say, this is Tiffany. She works with me and she's a value add. This is how she does this. So she would let other people know that I wasn't just a peon, even if I felt like a peon. And she would also allow my voice to be heard in those meetings. And I just try to lead like that. And I think that's a great way for leaders to lead, making sure everyone has the skills and the opportunities to be successful in their job. Everybody has the ability to have a voice, have a plan in the decision making. Of course, you as a leader have to be the ultimate decision maker. But every time I have a meeting, I'm talking to my direct reports about, what do you want to do? Okay, this is what we're going to do. And I also welcome a pushback. Like if they say, well, I don't know. And then we'll work it out and we go with them or we go with me or we go with a mix. So the unconscious bias, I guess I kind of left from that. But just recognizing that if someone has a different background, even if it's an educational background, I went to Sam Houston State University, but then I went to Southern Methodist University, Deadman School of Law, okay? And so I say that because when I was applying for jobs, they would say, oh, what undergrad did you go to? And I say Sam Houston State. And they were like, oh. So that makes me like less competent, less capable because I went to Sam Houston State, even though I went to Sam Houston State because it is number one ranked for criminal justice. Like that doesn't make sense. So just again, checking your biases, getting to know the individual that you're talking to and understanding where they're coming from. Just working with different people, understanding their background. Instead of assuming their background, learn about their background. Okay.
Yeah, awesome. Tiffany, one last thing, and I'm going to close with Jonathan. I have on the screen, and I had it up for Jonathan. I'm going to bring it back up. I have some contact for you. My wife actually asked the question, where can she find your books? Here's the website here. Would you like to add anything in closing remarks, Tiffany?
Yeah, so thank you all for tuning in. Thank y'all for having me as a host. I hope it's been helpful. The website is sugarcookiebooks.com and Facebook and Instagram. You can find me at Sugar Cookie Books, and then LinkedIn is T Diller. That's my big name. But anyway, I am currently doing a pre-order giveaway for my newest book that's coming out in October. The giveaway ends in 2 days. But what it is I am not transitioning, but I'm adding to the collection a transitional chapter book. And so right now I have 25 picture books, right? And so I am adding a chapter book, and it is a retelling of a classic fairy tale. So it is the three pigs versus the wolf. Emphasis on versus, because there's a legal spin to the whole thing. So if you've ever wondered what would happen if the pig sued the wolf, we're going to find out. So I really enjoyed making this book. I hope it's going to be a series. It's being well received. People are intrigued, as I am. My son has read it. He's laughed. He's been amused, and he's been mad at the coyote lawyer. So the wolf has a lawyer who's a coyote, and he's like, that doesn't make it. But I'm teaching him, and I'm hoping to teach other kids who read it about objectivity, about fairness, about your unconscious biases. Like we've known for so long the pigs as the three little pigs and the wolf as the big bad wolf. And so I'm like, no, we're not going to call them any of that. They're just pigs, and this is just the wolf. And we're about to hear both sides before we come to a conclusion. So anyway, that's that.
Awesome. Okay. For some reason, I think my wife is on going to the website right now, possibly doing a pre-order. Jonathan, you wanted to have a comment and any closing remarks from you, please?
Sure. Yeah. I think that as I was listening to Tiffany speak about her boss, it really reminded me of something that Soleil had mentioned earlier, which is all the extra work being done. And so even when you have an organization that's saying like, we'll have some organizations, we'll have some representation, there's actually this expectation of extra work. And if you're in a leadership position and you take this seriously, then it shouldn't be that you're basically saying, yes, we'll give you a seat at the table, but it's all on you. If you take it seriously, if you think it's important, make it a certain percentage of their job, give extra compensation, give time off from something to say, we're not just putting lip service behind this, we're actually saying this matters. And again, actions do speak louder than words. And this is one place where it can be done. And then the last thing I would add in there is, like Tiffany, just really appreciate you all having this conversation. It's such an important topic. And because these are unconscious, so easy to overlook, and really happy to have been able to contribute. And aside from the LinkedIn and my coaching and consulting stuff, which you have up on the screen right there, also, if anyone's interested, I do speaking on some of these topics, and just sent you along that you can either include in show notes or whatever, a page just dedicated to that. And thank you again for hosting and facilitating such an important discussion.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. I really appreciate your time. And there you go. My wife said, you're right, James. These books will make wonderful Christmas gifts this year. But thank you both for your time. Really appreciate it. Jonathan, safe travels when you're coming back home. And thank you both for joining.
Thank you so much.
Have a good one, guys. Awesome conversation, everyone. Thank you for being a part of that. Prince, you have the agenda. What do we have next?
Yeah, so first I want to say, man, those speakers were excellent. I know I didn't talk much there, but I was just taking everything in. That was a great opportunity for me to learn a lot.
It was the best you've ever sounded.
Well, it was really good, especially wanting to be a future Black male educator. So it was really good and a really important lesson to learn. So I thought that was great. Really loved it. But as far as next on the agenda, I'm going to be passing to Soleil, so that you can get your picks in. I saw that you had a pretty good week last week. So let's see if that streak can continue.
Fabulous week. So I am 5-1 on the year. So just to recap, last week, UNLV Running Rebels here in Las Vegas, +7 versus Kansas. They won outright, big winner. I had Miami versus Ball State, over 54.5. I thought Ball State was going to score. They didn't. It didn't matter. Miami scored 62, won that one. Chargers, 6.5-point favorites against the Panthers. They won by like 23 points. So for the year, my show picks are 5-1. This week's picks, here we go. Illinois, +9.5 road dogs against Nebraska. Seattle, home favorites, 5.5 versus Miami. And I know this one is going to make Patrick a little moist. Buffalo at home. Ooh. Buffalo at home, 5.5 favorites versus Jacksonville. Yeah, use that right hand tonight, buddy.
The real Josh Allen, stand up. The real Josh Allen, stand up.
Hey, Patrick, when you do that with your right hand, do you wear buffalo clothes while you're doing that?
I mean, I have this. This is on my left hand.
What is that? Is that buffalo?
Of course it is. Come on.
So while you're doing that, you could look at buffalo.
Yeah, I got something to stare at.
Okay, nasty. All right, I'm gonna shoot it over to James. He has some comments about last week's show and some of the things we discussed.
Okay. Yeah. So first of all, I was very impressed. You guys did a phenomenal job. I really enjoyed it. Seriously, I truly did. I was very surprised at how much Eric and Patrick were in agreement. It happened too many times. I should have had some tick marks. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, I don't know if that's Eric stepping up his game, you stepping down your game. You guys became brothers. I don't know what happened. Are you both eating shit now? I don't know.
Whoa.
Am I gonna play?
Whoa. So what do you mean by Eric stepping down?
Hold on.
Or
Let me bring
Patrick
this back up for a second. This is Eric in last place, okay, for the bro.
Why do you have that just right next to
this,
where you are?
This is P. Will in first place with the Bro Olympics. On standby. I got it on standby.
The great part about this show is that our perspective changes from week to week depending on the topic. Sometimes a perspective may even change in the middle of a show because a person has been enlightened about something that they did not know. So the fact that you can sit there and say that Eric has stepped up or Patrick has stepped down, I think that's an unconscious bias on your part.
No, I'm very conscious of it.
No, he's conscious about it.
Oh, well then fine. It's a conscious bias, but you know what? We all are very articulate and intelligent individuals here with different perspectives on just about everything. So the fact that Patrick and I, two brothers from different mothers, can come together and agree on something, I think that that's showing progress. Not necessarily big I's or little U's, but now it's us with different perspectives. So I'm sorry.
Panel. Have you
Are
seen
you
this
high?
panel? Like, what's wrong with you, buddy?
Not yet.
Are you okay?
Not yet, but maybe when I leave.
Yeah, I guess if he's high, then he really is brothers with Patrick.
Prescription.
Speaking of high, no. Actually, that is a pretty decent segue. Once again, guys, great show. Seriously. I kind of want to touch on the Tyreek Hill situation really quick. Patrick, you asked me about it. I commented on your post that you made reference to, and I said I wanted to reserve judgment until I actually see the video as well. I got mixed feelings on it. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to take much time now to talk about it. We can talk about it another time. Maybe I'll do a short or something and put it on the Facebook page. I got mixed feelings. As I've said so many times before, I was a volunteer police officer. Something I know in talking to police officers in Detroit is there's two calls that generally police officers don't like being involved in. One is a routine traffic stop because there's nothing routine about it. And second is domestic violence calls. A lot of times on domestic violence calls, the wife will call on the husband. But by the time the police gets there, the wife and husband is united and now they're versus the police officer. So they kind of hate being in that situation. And in traffic stops, they don't know who they're pulling over. I won't go into deep conversation on that, but for that police officer, he had no idea what he was going into. He just saw a sports car driving down the street, speeding, and he was making a traffic stop. What happens next? He could not anticipate. I understand why he wanted the window down, so you can see. Looking at the camera, the body camera, he could just see his reflection. You can kind of see a hint of Tyreek's wife beater, but could you have a good, clear view of his hands? Maybe not. So I can understand why you would want the windows down. From Tyreek's perspective, I understand why he didn't want the windows down. He flat out said on the CNN video interview that people was just going to walk past and take pictures. And it was going to go on social media and just going to continue to be embarrassing. I understand that too. It was Eric. I think you mentioned, Patrick. This is one of the times you agreed that you guys agreed with each other. It was a pissing match. It really was. In a pissing match with the police is always going to win. They are. So it really does not make sense to have a pissing match with the police because they're going to win. They're going to give you the biggest ticket they can. They might even do what they did to Tyreek, unfortunately, and that's unfortunate. They feel like some police officers feel like they are above the law, and that's why they can get away with things. That's very unfortunate. Eric threw out a percentage, 95% of police officers are good, 5% may not be. I don't know what that percentage is, but I do believe majority of police officers are good and mean well, but unfortunately it's the bad apples, and as a normal person, a normal citizen, we don't know who those bad apples are either. So that's unfortunate. Tyreek says something, the last thing I'm going to say about that situation for now, Tyreek says something that really resonated with me. He said, what if I wasn't Tyreek Hill? and that's so true. If he was not Tyreek Hill, what would this story be then? And we don't know the answer to that. But it's an important question, for him to say, "Don't leave me," that really, when I first heard that, when he was talking to his teammates, the very first thing that I thought of was George Floyd calling for his mother. That was the very first thing that came to my mind when I saw that. So what I did with the show, you guys, just so you know, I listened to the entire show, watched the entire show last week with you all. When you got ready to start talking about Tyreek, I turned it off and I wanted to watch the video so I would have my own view, not what you guys are saying. After I watched the video, I came back to you all. Agree with a lot of things you guys said. Anyway, Patrick, you asked, can you say douchebag? You said, can you say it? You said it twice, so I guess it's okay. But what's funny is, at the end, you said something about being fucked up, but you didn't ask if that could be said. So that can be said too. I just said it also. But, congratulations.
Listen. Fuck is my favorite sentence enhancer. It's my favorite sentence enhancer.
But I got one last thing about last week's show.
You put fuck on the end of any sentence and it enhances it. Period.
I'm going to give that a try. But I got one last thing to say about last week's show.
Shut the fuck up, see?
That wasn't at the end.
Oh, it was in the middle.
So it was. Soleil said something about firing James. Fuck that, I quit.
You put that at the beginning that time. He's out.
I'm kidding, I'm back. But no, that's all I got from last week's show. Great job, guys. You did amazing, for real.
Well, thank you. I'm sure you're actually talking about me, but
yeah, you did amazing as a driver as well. So yeah, Shay, great point. It's a late night show, so we can say fuck, and more fucks. We're not regulated by the FCC.
Fuck Tom Brady.
Fuck him. Eat
all
shit.
Right, we're just dropping F-bombs all over the place. Let me get us through this. So I'm gonna go to.
What's next?
I'm gonna go to this day.
He was about to before you interrupted him.
Yeah, I was trying to get to it. No, but I'm gonna go to this day in history. I didn't know much about this person, but you guys are all way older than me, so I know you'll know loads about him. But in 1970, I was surprised. I've heard the name before, but I didn't actually know them. Jimi Hendrix passed away. So he was only 27. I was very surprised by that. But I'd heard the name and knew he was a musician. But as far as I can't even, unless off the top of my head.
You don't know who Jimi Hendrix was?
I said I had heard the name, but off the top of my head, I don't even know if I can name a song.
Have you ever heard of a song called Voodoo Child?
Get out.
Purple Days?
No.
You actually probably did. I don't know if you remember Hulk Hogan during the NWO days. He came out to a rock and roll song with the riff.
Yeah, no, I think you guys are just old, Phil. I guess there would have been no chance of me knowing.
But he died today.
I only have one thing to say to that.
There's sentence enhancer. All right, but that's this day in history, and then I'll just talk about what we're going to be going over next week. So next week, and I'll show it at the bottom, we're going to be going over overcoming addiction. So I know this is something a lot of people suffer from, and it's probably something a lot of people suffer from without knowing. I think when we think about addiction, we think about the obvious ones like alcohol or even maybe like cigarettes or drugs. But addiction is a lot of things, and it's more than just the obvious ones. And it can be really tough to seek help, to get help. And there's a lot of steps that you have to take. And so I look forward to this episode and going over these things and maybe getting some insight that isn't first obvious when you think about it. So that's what I got for you guys. I look forward to seeing you all next week for that episode. But wrapping this one up, what's your spitball?
Always wrap it up. Wrap it up. That's good advice. Always wrap it up.
Before we get to that, Eric has a quick take on some current events.
Oh.
Well, as everybody knows, that Sean P. Diddy Combs has been indicted. He is sitting in a Brooklyn Federal Correctional Facility. He's been denied bail on all sorts of stuff. It was a 14-page indictment. I can't even get into how many things that Diddy allegedly did. you know, the rise and the fall of somebody who was an icon in the hip hop community, in the business community, period. Because let's face it, if you know anything about his story and about how he came up, he fought really, really hard to become a respectable businessman. At least that was the face that he wanted to portray. Now, you know, it's quite possible that this man could be found guilty of all of those crimes and he could wind up dead before he even gets to trial. So I don't know if any of my co-hosts want to comment on that, but I just think that it's just a crying shame that a person could have just been such a positive influence has just went down this rabbit hole that a lot of celebrities honestly have went down. And I think that Diddy is just going to be the surface of what's discovered, like anybody who was in his circle. And I hear that there's pastors, you know, Hollywood actors, all sorts of people that knew about this stuff and participated. So does anybody have any like brief comments or thoughts they might want to share?
I mean, I'll just touch on real quick one of the things that you said about someone that's been a positive influence. I think a lot of times these celebrities, we don't really know them. Like, of course, we know what we see, what's shown in the media, what's shown on the outside, but we don't truly know these people. And I think too frequently we put them on a pedestal, and we look up to them without truly knowing who they are on the inside. And then that's why a lot of times these stories come out and we're like, oh my gosh, not so-and-so, they would have never done this. When in actuality, that's who they are. That they if you knew them, you'd be like, yeah, no, that's actually who they are as a person. And they have so much money that it's easy to cover that stuff up. I mean, this is just stuff that comes out about the people that get caught. Think about all the people who don't get caught, who you think are excellent, wonderful people, who in actuality, doing a lot of stuff on the side that you wouldn't care for at all. So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, just ask Bill Cosby.
We already talked on the cheesecake. We already mentioned that. Yeah.
Well,
All I have to say is 1,000 bottles of baby oil
exactly.
and 800 dildos.
I mean,
Don't
what
drop the
kind of
soap.
party was that?
That was one hell of a party.
Hell, how many people were at the damn party? Shoot.
And
That
why
was just
wasn't I
one Tuesday
invited?
night.
No,
That was just one Tuesday night.
I'm kidding. It was a joke. It was a joke.
Never mind. Anyway,
It was
all
a
right.
joke.
Before we move on, one last thing. I gotta ask. Soleil, I know you're not supposed to ask a lady her age, so please excuse me. If you want to say pass, it's okay. Pat Princeton, I'm not gonna ask you this question because you're not there yet. What have you all done since age 31? Soleil, I'm gonna start with you. What have you done of importance since age 31?
What have I done of importance? I mean, do you know who I am?
I know who you are, but the listeners, just for the listeners.
Okay, I mean,
And I said what, not who, by the way. Just
Nice.
Okay. I do have a running list. I'll have to calculate the.
What, a body count?
Yeah, I do have a. You've seen it.
Oh, okay, got it.
yeah.
You see it.
Just
Anyway,
kind of some high level stuff. Just name like 2 or 3 things you've done since 31 years old.
yeah, I've been on numerous nonprofit boards helping ease homelessness here in Las Vegas, helping ensure LGBT rights in Las Vegas, and now the focus with the election coming up, focusing on voter registration and equality for all people through my current work. So yeah, a lot of that over the years.
Awesome. Patrick?
I just thought of an inappropriate joke, so now I got to get back to what I was actually going to say. Since 31, well, let's see. I've built 2 houses. I've raised what I think is a pretty awesome, amazing daughter.
Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, right. I've built a pretty successful business, entertainment business. I'm pretty proud of that. I've created a full-time job out of what a lot of people do part-time and, made a living out of it. And it's something that I'm proud of. It's not a 9-to-5 job. I've carved my own path. I've kind of always done that kind of, learn the hard way kind of kid. It's always kind of been the way I am. But, yeah, I'm in a good place, man. The last 9-10 years have been very good to me, and even before that. I mean, being married to an amazing wife, having an amazing family, I can't complain.
Okay, Eric, what have you accomplished that you're proud of since age 31?
You know what? Most of my children have graduated from high school at least with a one to go. Um, Expanded my own education, taking classes, getting certifications, um, co-host a podcast. Hell, survive the pandemic. Shit, all of those things I'm very proud of.
Yeah. Okay. All right, awesome. All those things are amazing things. Since 31, I think I graduated college after 31. I'm pretty sure I did. Yeah, I did. Graduated college after 31. Bought a house after 31. My son graduated high school since I turned 31. A lot of good things happened to me as well. Lots of travel. I got to throw that in there. Yep, him. That's the one. Lots of travel, lots of great things, lots of memories built with my family since I was 31. I asked that question because this is me pulling the rug out, ladies and gentlemen. There's a gentleman named Marcellus Williams. Not sure if anyone has heard of him, but
No
he
relation.
is a 55-year-old black male that is currently in jail and in Missouri. He is on death row. He was wrongly convicted in 1998 of murder. He was alleged to have stabbed a white woman 19 times. The typical story that a lot of us are used to hearing. Black male, poor, doesn't have means, perfect target. Let's arrest him, let's charge him, found guilty, sentenced to death. He's had a stay of execution several times, and his life is on the line coming up next Tuesday. Now, the question is, well, if he did the crime, why are we fighting for him? The prosecution has changed their song. They've changed their dance. They are now advocating for him to get another stay. Look him up, Marcellus Williams. The court system will not overturn or issue another stay. So right now, this man is set to be sentenced to death or be executed, I should say, next Tuesday. So definitely look up the story. Very interesting, very unfortunate. A lot of people, once again, on his side, including the prosecution, which is mind-boggling on why can't anything be done. But I just learned of it today, right before the show. So definitely look into this story. I think it's a very interesting story. Marcellus Williams. He's 55. He was sentenced. He was convicted when he was 31. So all those things we just talked about that we were able to do since 31, this man is really behind bars. He hasn't been able to do anything, and once again, wrongly convicted. So anyway, with that being said, sorry I just snatched that rug from under everyone. It is time for spitball. I went back and forth on what I wanted to talk about today. And I decided to have a real serious conversation. It really is. It's not going to be an okey doke like Eric likes to pull. Last week, guess what, y'all? I was on vacation. And it got me to thinking. I know I had to say one last time. Shay and I was, yes, on a cruise. Over 4,000 people was on this cruise. During this time, they had over 60 countries represented of employees that was on the ship that goes on 4, 5, 6 month contracts, sometimes longer. And I thought about something. We are getting along on this ship. Everything is in perfect harmony. We all are having fun. We're all laughing. For you, Patrick, we're all just having a good old grand time. But as soon as we docked, real world hit us, right? We start talking about politics again, and we start talking about and thinking about all these things that divide us. Patrick, I say to you specifically sometimes, let's just not talk about something because it's just going to cause division. And you always come back in intellectually and you say, we need to talk about these things. And you're absolutely right. But gosh darn it, it felt so good for 7+ days to just live in harmony. It didn't matter if the person next to me was white, was black, was gray, old, young, gay, straight. It didn't matter what they were. We all were just there having a good old time, including the crew. You know, over 4,000 people just living life to the fullest and not thinking about the bullshit that's going on, the division that we have. You know, should guns be controlled? Should they not? Should we take them away? Should we not? Should we vote Republican? Should we vote Democrat? Is this guy crazy? Is he not? Should he drop out the race? Should he not? All these things that really just divide us is going to be there. Let's enjoy life, people, as much as possible. There's posts I've seen on Facebook that says, don't let politics come in the way of friendships. To a certain extent, I understand that. And to a certain extent, I agree with it. But sometimes it goes deeper than politics. But let's just get along. As Rodney King said in the 90s, can't we all just get along? I just had to say that, y'all.
So moral of the story is go on more vacations like James.
I mean, hey.
Specifically cruises.
Let's book a cruise right now. I'm game.
All right. Can I borrow however much money it costs?
Yeah, Princeton got you.
Yeah. Rich millennial.
I'll be
on the last
vacation in
cruise
2
and I live
weeks.
with him.
Hey, the invite was there, sir. All right, guys. Thanks. Have a great week, and I'll see y'all next week.
Deuces.